Good evening and welcome. I am so glad you're here tonight. My name is Dr. Stephanie Nielsen. I am a member of the staff of the DNA company, and we are here to talk about gut and brain health. We are so glad that you're here. We already have a lot of questions, and we already have a lot of interest in the gut-brain connection. I'll be your host tonight, and I have two amazing of our functional genomic practitioners. One that you know and dearly and love her, Dr. Lara Varden, and AJ. The neat thing about AJ is the boomer nutritionist. She works with the boomer. She works with a lot of people, but the boomer nutritionist is such a fun thing because so many of us get to a certain age in our life where things just aren't working the way they need to. And we didn't realize that our gut was so related to our brain health, but now we do. So I know we've got a poll that we're working on right now, and we really want you to jump in and answer that poll so that we can focus on the things that are so amazing about the gut-brain connection, how we can go there. So I already see some wonderful things that they love how Dr. Lara has been working and is so straight up, is so honest, dives in and gets things done. Well, both AJ and Dr. Lara do that. So this will be really great. So again, welcome. I'm going to start with, first of all, AJ, will you tell us a little bit about you and how you got started, not only in nutrition, but also how boomers came to be the group that you focus on?
My start in nutrition really kind of started with the gut, right? So I was the kid who, maybe wouldn't have like a bowel movement for like 2 weeks. I had no idea as a kid that, those things weren't normal, right? So I just remember I always felt terrible, felt miserable. Even as a kid, had like brain fog and was tired and all of these things. And so really it became me going to the doctor and wanting to figure out what was going on and then being like, oh, you're totally healthy. And me being like, but I feel terrible. And started down this road of nutrition. And then really it was with the passing of, so shortly after my husband and I got married, his parents passed away of cancer, lung and brain. And it kind of just thrust me even further into this world of nutrition. There has to be a way to, at least increase quality of life during those times and or reverse illness and disease, right? And so in that, I realized that I felt like boomers were kind of experimented on the most in the dietary realm, right? It was the advent of TV dinners and fast food and all these great canned foods and just all these things that don't eat salt, don't eat fat, don't do this, don't do that. That now the science and everything is coming back around and saying, well, actually, we kind of got it wrong. And so my heart is for the boomers just because, my parents are boomers and my in-laws were boomers. And I like, as I say, I always like to keep everybody an is rather than a were. So if I can keep boomers as I am a boomer and great, healthy, long lives, then that's kind of my goal. So that's why those are my people.
Well, it's interesting because you talk about they experimented on those group. Well, I think they're still experimenting. There's a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
health information out there that we keep finding is different. Laura, you're a major researcher.
Mhm.
Why is it that you think we're told one thing and then we transition and we find out something else is actually truth? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yes, unfortunately, being in the field of research, writing grants, trying to get grants for that research, it's pulling back that curtain and really seeing what goes on. That unfortunately, the interest of science and learning for the sake of learning and overall health is not as altruistic in the field as one might think. Unfortunately, those that hold the purse strings hold the information of research that gets done and that information that gets put out. So a lot of times those purse strings are held by big pharma or big food, big ag, these large corporations that, the sugar industry and, the dairy industry or whomever it may be. And if they don't like what it is that's being studied, first of all, you're not going to get funded. But second of all, you probably won't get published. So one thing that I always look at when I read a study, first of all, assessing, everybody always sees those big titles of, this, sugar doesn't affect mood and behavior in children or anything like that.
Yeah.
And you go to see who these studies are done by, and you start seeing who's doing the funding, and that really gives you a clue into where the slant, the biasness is. And unfortunately, I mean, as a scientist, the whole point is to be unbiased, that you want to just have the information out there, whatever it shakes out to be, but that is not the case. So yeah, unfortunately, a lot of what's being told is more for that almighty dollar, the power, who's controlling the information stream through the funding. And it's also—
Well, I know I can tell you that science, when I was in school, was about proving your hypothesis wrong. Now, I want you to think about that. I have a hypothesis that eating this kind of food creates this thing. If you can prove it wrong, then you're not right. But if you can't prove it wrong, if you continue to prove it again and again, then we call it a fact. So here's what I want you to know about science, and then we're going to dig into some science in gut and brain health, is that if you believe a certain diet works for you, a certain lifestyle works for you, try to prove yourself wrong. What happens if I change my diet? So if someone is a complete carnivore and they haven't looked at their DNA and they don't see if they process fat and protein properly, they may or may not be capitalizing on their health. What about vegetarian or veganism? If someone says, for philosophical reasons, I only want to eat plant products, but they can't break them down or digest them, is that the right thing? That's why we really value having the testing like our DNA 360, so you can see what is going on in your body and the potential for you to ramp that up or ramp it down to maximize your health. Now, Dr. Laura, you are again our big researcher. What is the latest research that is going on with gut and brain health right now that we need to know about?
Well, there are some papers that I have been reading that actually, not like super recent of this year, but some ones that I pulled that I thought would be very informative and cover a lot of what we were talking about and what we want to talk about tonight, which is the microbiome and mental health, brain health. Both of these papers are actually review papers, and they came out in 2021. The first one is from the journal Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews. And here they talk about looking at microbes for mental health, really determining the role of microbial, I should say, metabolic pathways in human brain health and disease. What they actually did is they looked at about 280 different scientific research papers, and the evidence of the metabolites that are made from the microbiome and its association to things like Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, anxiety, depression. Really fantastic. If anybody wants to totally nerd out and read some of these papers, I would highly recommend it. The link will be put in the chat as well as added to the show notes afterwards. The other one was specific on the ApoE gene, because this is a major gene that we look at in your cardiovascular profile. And its association, well, I mean, in our reports, it's the association on your cardiovascular health, your lipid profile, cholesterol profile, because that's generally where you will see it. If you happen to have a variant, you'll see higher levels, even when, you are trying to be healthy. That's just something that can happen genetically speaking. But there are ways to help alleviate that. But the paper that I was looking at is about ApoE and the Alzheimer's disease. This is a major concern of so many people, of myself included. I have two grandmothers that passed away from, Alzheimer's degenerative diseases. So this is of concern. And it talks about and dives deep into what is ApoE? What are the variants? How does this affect and influence Alzheimer's disease? So the link has been put in the chat. Again, it can be a little dense in some areas, but there are certainly enough information that someone reading it can extract good, knowledgeable, actionable things in the fact of going, oh, when you're looking at your reports, you're saying, okay, I have a 3-4 on my ApoE. ApoE4 is actually the variant that puts you at a higher risk of Alzheimer's. ApoE3 is more of the normal average. ApoE2 is actually protective. So when you're looking in your reports, take a look at that. And then you can actually see, oh, well, what's going on in my body? And you can look at the paper and, take a look and see the pathways, what's going on. So those are some of the things that we can dive into a little bit of how they influence us at a clinical level as we get going.
And you know what? Speaking of that, let's dive in to see some of the answers of our quiz to see who we've got watching tonight and how we can focus on where we can get this. Well, we've got a lot of boomers. 65% of you are boomers. So AJ, get ready. We've got 19% that are Gen X. I am so impressed that we have 6% millennials, and then we have some others here. So I love that people who are younger are starting to look at it, but I also love that we've got people that are saying, okay, I'm right in the middle of where I don't feel, it's like my get up and go has got up and gone, and I want it back. We're about 50-50 split on gut health and brain health, and we'll go into that as soon as we get done here, because it is so important for us to understand what science used to say and what we know now. 54% are here for gut health, 46% are here for brain health, and then 22% said they came because they want to prevent poor gut health. 22% said they're already experiencing some gut health. 21% said they want to prevent cognitive decline. 10% said they're currently experiencing cognitive decline. And another 23% said general knowledge. So we've got a very good split.
Yeah.
So let's go into the gut-brain connection. It used to be that we said that, the gut did one thing, which was digest, and the brain did one thing, which was cognitive. But now we know that 80% of our immune system is in the gut, and our neurotransmitters, neuro meaning brain, that we used to think were all made in the brain are actually made in the gut. AJ, when we were talking earlier, when you work with your boomers, you start with some very tangible, hands-on, if here's where you are, then let's get to where the next step is. Can you go through what we were talking about with where you start and where you move your clients to really start getting some good gut-brain connection and improve their health?
So my approach is to always keep it simple, right? So not only am I typically working with boomers, and I work with a wide range of people, but I'm also dealing with a lot of very sensitive clients. And so there's, webinars like this are wonderful, right? It's a way for people to connect with practitioners, to see what protocols they use, and try and find some help. The biggest issue I see is that I'm always having to kind of back clients down, right? It's like, oh, you're on 15 different supplements for your gut. Okay, well, let's just kind of get back to the basics. Are you constipated? Or do you have loose stools? Are we running to the bathroom, or can we not get there often enough? And we kind of have to start with these very basic things. Tell me about your mood. How are you feeling? Are you exhausted? Do you have any energy? Because here's the thing, a lot of people, a lot of clients will say, you know, when I have a bowel movement, I feel amazing afterwards, right? So they're like, as long as I can get my bowel movement in for the day, the 1, the 2, and then they're like, my day is good. If I do not have that bowel movement, then my day, I am not going to feel very well. And so I like to start with diet. Okay, let's start there. Let's take a look at a few things, right? And I don't ever want to overwhelm the client. And I think it's important that everyone kind of we have to take these moments where we sit and we assess, okay, what does I also ask, what does your poop look like, right? When we talk about gut, and that's funny, we're here talking about gut and brain health, yet now we're bringing in the toilet, right? Because it's like, oh, well, we really have to talk about that. We really need to look at the toilet. Yes, right. Photos even, right? So that you can assess how things are going. Create a little folder in your iPhone, of like the poo photos, and you can like put a little lock code on it or something, right? If you don't want anyone accessing it. But having a reference of like, okay, my stools have been loose, or no, it was a perfect banana this day, and finding some associations. It is your bowel's worse when you're stressed, right? Because there's this balance between, our gut and our brain, but we also have to bring into kind of like that stress and kind of those intangible things, right? It's easy to, okay, we can talk about the tangibles. We can talk about food. We can talk about supplements. If you've taken antibiotics, we can talk about these things. What about the intangibles? How's the stress load in your life? What are maybe some environmental toxins that you're encountering that you don't really realize? What kind of environment are you sitting in at work? Right. So we just kind of start with those basic environmental things. And then I like just to know, do you want to go more, or do you need to go less? Does it need to be firmed up, or do we need to increase? And you kind of start there with just those very basic questions.
So if somebody says, because I have family members that have a lot of gut issues, many of you know that if you've watched me before, my family has celiacs. And so some of them had chronic constipation with their celiacs. Most of them had loose stools. And they always said, we just stomach problems run in our family. So let's get a couple tips for people who aren't moving, because we know moving is so important for detoxifications. Moving is so important you can't put more good stuff in if you can't get the stuff out. Talk to us about constipation for a minute and some of your general recommendations.
So I go straight to all the unhealthy things, right? I want you to maybe consider some more fat in your diet. Oh no, that was supposedly a bad thing back in the day. Fat. Yes. Fat. Where's the salt at in your diet? How are you hydrating with water, right? So we think about, okay, fat, what is it? It's kind of like a lubricant, right? So fat, salt, water. And the go-to is some magnesium. If we're going to do a supplement, an easy one is just some magnesium citrate, right? So we're going to get some magnesium in there, but we're going to have to take a look at the diet. One of the most basic things you can be doing, and I'm always like, well, how well do you chew your food, right? Because if we're supposed to have our food completely chewed before we swallow to make things easier on our stomach and our digestive process, well, if you're just chew, get 2 bites in and you're swallowing it, it almost looks like it did when it went into your mouth. Well, then your stomach is like, really? Like, you're doing that to me? Thanks. Like, it's going to take me a really long time to get this out the other end, because I've got so much more work to do in here because you didn't take the time to use your teeth. And it's like, they aren't just for selfies, these teeth have a purpose, so we need to use them for why they were created. And so those are kind of my first thoughts. We kind of go over, what are they eating? And, here is a supplement that's going to be fairly easy to implement across the board, right? Most people are deficient in magnesium. And so that's a really safe place to start, right? Herbs, people will say, oh, well, we could try this herb or we could try that. And maybe you can, but you could have an underlying sensitivity that's causing some of these gut issues. And so those are my very basic tips in the beginning is consider your salt intake, consider your fat. Are you hydrating? Are you chewing your food? Are you on a probiotic, or what supplements are you on that maybe we need to research a little bit and see, can those lead to constipation? Could you be taking, say, a binder because you were doing a detox protocol and, maybe that's slowed you down a little bit, right? So those are just some very basic, surface level kind of things that you need to analyze. And the funny thing is they're so basic, people just overlook them. Like they don't even think about salt. It's like, well, if you don't have enough salt and you don't have enough fat, like you're going to struggle in the bathroom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Dr. Laura, you talked about microbiome and AJ just mentioned probiotics. So this is a hot button for me because everybody says, oh, don't worry, I'll just grab a yogurt, I'll get my probiotic. This is how I get my probiotics. Okay, I could start on a whole dissertation on microbes. What are they? Why are they important? What is a microbiome? Talk to us about how this microbiome goes with constipation, diarrhea.
Well, when we're talking about the microbiome, a lot of times people will associate that with just the gut. I will say we have microbiomes in many other places as well. We have it on our skin. For women, we have it in our vaginas, okay? You have it in your lungs. You have it in your mouth. Now, this is really important because when you think about our eating and the whole digestive system, your GI tract, you can kind of think of it like a donut, okay? And I say this only in the shape that we are actually, it's open from mouth to anus, all right? The insides, that's parenteral, that is, we don't want a lot of that stuff that goes through our mouth stomachs to be inside the body until it is processed, okay? So the processing, and I loved how, AJ, you were talking about, these basic things like chewing your food, because when we get our nutrients, okay, first of all, we are not what we eat. We are what our microbiome breaks down and allows us to absorb. So real quick, biome, the microbiome, what is that? It is a conglomeration of microbes, bacteria, fungi, all of these different species. And we're talking, there's trillions of them. There is some literature says that the amount of microbiome, these species outnumber our cells, our human cells, 10 to 1. That's a lot. And that's a lot of DNA that they are also carrying. So the thing is that we want a nice, rich diversity. And we want good gut bacteria. We don't want too many pathogenic bacteria, but they're always going to be there. They just have to be kept in check by the good bacteria. But either way, they all have to play in the sandbox. It's just, there are times that certain groups end up getting bigger and stronger and fighting out other groups. And this is when we can get dysbiosis. So when we're talking about dysbiosis, we are talking about an imbalance in our groups, in our variety and diversity. And I do have to put a plug in here for our Gut 360 test, because you can't really know what to do unless you know what you have, what's going on. And the one thing I love about our Gut 360 test, which we are working with through Biome, they really, it goes through and looks at your diversity, looks at the phyla, the families, what's going on, what are the major players, because there are players that break down plant, the foods that you eat that are vegetables. There's ones, and that's Bacteroidetes, the Firmicutes family. They break down fat, which AJ was talking about. You got to have fat in your diet. Well, you've got to have the gut bacteria that help break that down. There's also proteobacteria. Those are usually very high when you have a lot of inflammation. There's also Ascomycota, which is a fungi that works beneficially and synergistically with the other bacteria. So, with the test, it also starts breaking down into beneficial species, pathogenic species, and then additional species. So again, you need to know who's in the play box, who's in that sandbox playing, well or not so well. So that way you can focus in on where to work, how to do things.
So the first thing that people need to understand, the microbiome, as Laura said, are in all these different areas. And one of the things to know is a single bacteria, such as a Lactobacillus acidophilus, which if you look at 99% of the probiotics out there have that, but they'll have, maybe that's the only thing they have. She just said there's trillions of these. So what are some practical ways that you can enrich your microbiome? One, get outside, breathe fresh air, get away from stale city air, get away. A lot of us live in a box, and then we leave our box and get into a little box that we call a car, to go to a box that we call work, to go to a bathroom. I saw some people talking about, many adults have limited bathroom availability, to come back to our other box, to get in the little box, to come home. You got to get outside and breathe some fresh air. You got to move, put your face in some flowers and smell them, touch a tree. All of that will impact your microbiome. Okay. A variety of your food, rainbow diet. Okay. You should have multicolors, because each one of those carry different, things. Farmers markets, or how do you guys feel about organic versus non-organic? Let's do a quick one there.
Organic.
I was gonna say, or I'm like, so life or death? Is that the question? Just, I have a very strong opinion.
People say I cannot afford organic.
And that's where we can look, okay, what are the foods that are most sprayed? Okay, prioritize those as your organics. What like avocados, for example, people love avocados. They aren't sprayed that heavily. Okay, don't opt for the organic there, because you're going to pay who knows even what, right? So focus on the foods that are the most sprayed, and kind of try to make sure those are more organic. And again, maybe prioritize, in my opinion, going with the grass-fed, focus more on keeping your animal products really clean, right? If you can't, you have to make the decision on where, because we all have limited resources, right? Where do I budget? How do I prioritize? And where I say prioritize is go organic where you can, prioritize your meat, eggs, and fats, right? Because there's toxins that accumulate in the fats, and then we ingest them from the animals, yada, yada, antibiotics and all the things, which is a whole nother webinar. But, then prioritize, okay, well, if you can't get it organic, prioritize non-GMO. Well, it says non-GMO. Okay, great. That's a great start. At least you're not going to be exposed to some of the things that you could be exposed to there. And, and I want to touch on your eat the rainbow. Eat the rainbow if the rainbow works for you. I'm in a population group that the rainbow doesn't work for me if I want my gut to work, right? And so we have to
nightshades, or what do you have problems with?
Well, so I'm in that histamine group, right? So I kind of have to be careful with the histamines. I have to be careful with salicylates. I have to be careful with certain oxalates. So, but it was a journey to find, okay, gosh, yeah, when I went low histamine, I felt so much better. Okay, well, something still isn't quite right. Where can I, okay, well, when I took out some of the salicylates, okay, we made more progress. And then really fine tuning what you can eat and not forcing yourself into the eat the rainbow if you can't. Now, if you can, you need to do it because I mean, there's a lot of yummy foods out there and we should take advantage of all the
So
nutrients
let's
they
get
have.
specifics. If somebody has histamine issues, if they have skin issues, because we know that when your gut, mouth to anus, is actually outside our body, and the skin is the body's like a donut. So we've got the skin on the outside, and then we have the mouth to anus. It's the inside of the donut hole, and whatever's happening in the inside in that gut is often reflected on the skin, i.e., eczema, psoriasis. So if somebody has a lot of hives and issues, okay, maybe their gut isn't working so well. Talk about histamine foods real quickly for people. And then Laura, I'm going to jump back to you. And I want to, for all those people who've had the DNA 360, let's talk about genes they can be looking at to know about these things for them, okay? So AJ, histamine foods, give us a list of them that people should consider avoiding because maybe the rainbow doesn't work for them.
Well, so the first one that I always pick on, and it's because I'm mourn the loss of this food in my life, is chocolate. That can be a serious irritant to someone who has high histamine, right? So we have foods that has issues with high histamine foods, right? So we have foods that are considered high histamine on their own. And this is where the gut and histamine issue kind of you get into some conversations because what do we say is going to improve gut health? Fermented foods. Oh, eat the kimchi, eat the sauerkraut, eat the sourdough bread, eat all those yummy fermented foods so that you can seed your gut with these, amazing bacteria. Meanwhile, over on the stick to low histamine foods, I'm like, don't touch fermented foods, stay away from the kimchi, stay away from the sauerkraut, stay away from the yogurt, because those are really high in histamine and they're going to disrupt your gut. And histamine intolerance can present itself either with the constipation side or with more of like the diarrhea side. So again, it's kind of like you were saying with celiac in your family. Some of them were having more of the constipation, some of them were having, more of the loose stools and the diarrhea. And so it's just a matter of dialing those things in. But, I think of tomatoes, I think of chocolate, kind of what are those common things where it's like, oh, we heard dark chocolate's good for us. Okay, let's eat a bunch of dark chocolate. But then I'm not feeling well. Could it be histamine? And also histamine intolerance doesn't need to be confused with actual food allergies that can cause you a rash or cause some kind of allergic emergency. So it's very different, and all of it affects your gut health and ultimately affects your brain health. And that's where kind of learning whether you're an eat the rainbow type or maybe be a little bit more reserved, and stick to
Give a
your
limited
personal
rainbow.
foods. A limited rainbow,
A
yeah. Just
little
pick a
rainbow,
few
maybe
colors.
not a double rainbow.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you can't have chocolate and you can't have tomatoes, what do you tell your patients as alternatives so that they don't feel cheated? Because I know as a gut health person, for a long time, I felt like I was really being left out. It's like, what do you mean you can eat all that and I'm stuck and I can't? And then if I accidentally slip or somebody slips my stuff in, my reactions are worse. I felt so deprived. And that emotional piece, we'll get into the brain in just a minute, is horrible. So what alternatives do you give for them with
Well, so it's kind of different for everyone. And I think it's more along the lines of what are you willing to cover? It's because there's a whole long list of foods that are high in histamine, right? So if we go and I say, okay, these are all the high histamine foods, and I only want you to, you have to stay away from all of these, that can feel very depriving, right? Where you're just like, gosh, I feel like I'm not getting to eat anything, especially if some of those are your favorite foods, right? For me, one of them was avocados. And I would eat avocados daily. Now, for a while, were avocados completely out? Yes. Can I now sneak an avocado in from time to time and enjoy it? Yes, but it's about where you're at in your journey. And that's the other thing I really want to emphasize when people are trying to fix their gut. and they're trying to work on, say, their cognition, all these different things, especially when it comes to diet and supplementation. It's not like each protocol is a lifelong assignment, right? So it's not that you're always going to have to avoid a particular food. Now, barring like an actual allergy, of course. But when it's like, hey, you need to follow this lower histamine diet for a little while. We've got some, you've got a little bit of leaky gut. We need to do XYZ. It's a process. You're not chained to it for the rest of your life. And I think that's an important perspective to keep, is that it's just a season. And that makes abstaining from something a little bit easier, because you know that it's not lifelong. You know that it's just long enough to get yourself healed, start working on some better habits, right? Because a lot of issues we have are just formed from the poor habits that we maybe had earlier in life.
Yep. And I love that we've got such a participatory audience. First of all, leftovers have a lot of histamine. So if you have a histamine issue, those are an out. As a pharmacist, antihistamines we give, Benadryl, Zyrtec, Allegra, but they make you really tired. Seeing gut and brain connection there. A lot of people are taking antihistamines to sleep at night. But maybe you're having too many histamine foods, and that's why you're trying to shut down. So, and I see a couple ahas. I love the nuggets, the pearls that we give on these, because people go, oh my gosh, I wondered why every time I ate dark chocolate, why I felt cruddy afterwards. I never thought about histamines. Okay, so now you've got some of those. Laura, for those people who have had the DNA 360 test, what are the things that they can go back and look for gut health? What are your top 3 that you want them to go look at, so that they can start tweaking their gut and looking at that? Or if they've looked at those and go, I'm still having trouble, then we want to make sure to get them with a functional genomic practitioner to help tweak this, like you or AJ.
Well, the specific pathways that we really focus on when it comes to gut health, your microbiome, it would be your glutathione conjugation pathway. So these are your GST genes, the GST-T1, GST-M1, and GST-P1. Then you have your FUT2 gene. This one really relates to how well do you transfer your B12 from your gut to the bloodstream. And FUT2 gene also is very important as an anchor for the food and the microbiota in your gut. So, and the funny thing is, there's not a optimal version for everything and bad for the other. It's actually like a double-edged sword, because if you happen to have something, for example, if you have the AA version of FUT2, that is wonderful for the absorption of B12 from the gut to the bloodstream, in which case, for example, I have that version. So I could take B12 cobalamin in pill form and I'd be fine. But if you have the version of a GG, okay, you don't absorb it very well. And therefore you need a sublingual form of cobalamin. But the thing is, if you have the GG version, it actually is more beneficial for your gut biome, where mine is actually the opposite. With the AA, I actually don't do so well with, that anchoring of the food in the biome. So very, very interesting how, all that works in the different players. And the last one, the pathway that really is important for the microbiome is your vitamin D pathway. This is so important, because when you consider that vitamin D is actually a hormone, and we've talked about this in other webinars, that it, on almost every single cell in the body, there's a vitamin D receptor. And vitamin D as a hormone, and what it does, and the fact that it plays an important role in over 10% of all of your protein coding genes, and there are 22,000 protein coding genes. you realize the importance. And there's a lot in literature and scientific literature showing vitamin D, hormone D, affecting the health of the gut. So dive into your microbiome report. It's a sub-report of your diet and nutrition system. So those are the three main pathways I would definitely dive into.
And then, so you've got those three main pathways, and then we also have a new test, which is the Gut 360 that you were referencing earlier, which goes into, you know, the full breakdown. So if you've played with it a little, and AJ, I love how you said, for the people, I'm a huge person with fermented foods, but when my gut was really bad, when we first discovered my celiacs and I had my cancer at 21, I couldn't do fermented foods. Now I do now. I make my own sauerkraut. I still can't do kombucha. There's too much sugar there. Sugar's a big issue with my, you know, DNA and insulin resistance. And I'm also in that kind of borderline boomer, you know, age where when my gut is out, when my sugar is out, my brain is out. And we're going to transition to that in a minute. There is a question that says, what is the optimal level of vitamin D? So it used to be that they said in the US, 10 or higher was adequate. Change in science. Okay. Then they went to 15. It's now 30 or higher. If you want real results, 30 to 50 will make you pretty bulletproof from coughs and colds. 50 to 80 will make you bulletproof from chronic disease or help you remediate. If you're in a chronic disease state, you've got to have possibly even 80 to 100. If you start muscle cramping, it's too high. There's a lot of traditional Western practitioners who start freaking out if you're over 50. Again, chronic disease, cancer, celiacs, thyroid disorders, any autoimmunity, you've got to be up in that 50, 60, 70, 80 if you really want to heal. So that may be helpful for you. So we talked a little bit about histamine. We talked about poop. We talked about getting that gut going. Do you know that 80% of your neurotransmitters are made in your gut, and then they go up to the brain? So let's talk about the brain. AJ, I'm back to you. You talk to your boomers, you get them pooping a little better, or you slow them down and they're having those beautiful bananas, or they're circling the ring and they're taking pictures for you.
Yeah.
Okay. When you're pooping good, you're feeling good. So when you're not, you're not. Let's talk about how gut and brain work together and what we need to do to refresh those brains for people who are out.
So typically what I do so say we've gotten the bowel moving, like you said, everything is just looking hunky-dory in the toilet and we're really happy with all of it, but they're still like, you know, my vitamin, like my brain is still not there. Like I'm still just feeling low energy, you know, what's going on? At that point, I do like to look at micronutrient levels, right? Because like Dr. Lara said, like you aren't what you eat, you know, basically you're what your body's actually going to absorb, right? And digest. And so how well are you digesting the various vitamins, right? So we can go back to her vitamin B12 example. We can have your bowels moving now, but are you low in B12? How do we know? We can test, we can look at these things, we can look at your genetics, right? And we say, well, you really should be on a sublingual. Okay, you know, you can take this or that or the other. And so from there, we can look at, okay, what are your inflammation levels? You know, what can we then begin addressing without fear that we're going to maybe cause more problems, right? Because sometimes it's like, you know, if the bowels aren't moving properly, we just don't want to put the cart before the horse, right? We don't want to say, oh, well, maybe I just need to do a serious detox program, or, oh, maybe I need to mega dose all of these different vitamins. And it's kind of like, wait, let's just make sure everything is moving. Then from there, if we're worried about cognitive health, we're going to look at vitamin levels. That's what I like to do. And also just how you're feeling, right? Because like, for example, for people who can't eat the rainbow, I'm one of those people. So I do have to be mindful. Am I getting enough of, you know, B12 or folate or whatever? Do I need to increase my supplementation? because sometimes my dietary intake is a little bit restricted? Or do I need to focus on some other options like some beef liver, right? So I don't make the conversion from, beta carotene, right? We need to convert our vitamin A into an active form. I don't make that conversion very well, right? So I can't eat, say, a bunch of carrots or a bunch of, some orange type of food and, get my beta carotene, get my vitamin A active. I need egg yolks. I need beef liver. I have to use these different foods. And so sometimes it's just a matter of further dialing in the diet based on kind of what your genetics are telling you, and couple that with, say, micronutrient testing, where we can see, okay, you are deficient in this area, but now that your bowels are moving and you're digesting your food better, you're actually probably going to be more likely to absorb some of these supplements rather than them being almost more of a waste of money in the beginning when your gut isn't functioning completely properly. So that's kind of my next step.
That makes sense. And Dr. Varden, how would you address transitioning to the brain? And now that somebody's gut is beginning to work, they've begun to work on it, they understand more of what they should be doing. Where do you go from there with your clients?
Well, first of all, taking it as their gut is starting to heal. I like data. First of all, I'm hoping that we would have had the gut 360 test to see where they needed focus. I would periodically, probably 4 months, 6 months, have them do another test. Have we shifted the population of your microbiome? Are we on the right track? Again, I do like the data, because if you don't track it, it's hard to manipulate and make the changes and know that you are, actually making good changes. But I also don't like to just make changes to change a number value. Because a lot of people, I see their blood work and this, and they're worried about, oh, my cholesterol number, and they just want to focus on changing that cholesterol number. Well, that's not the main focus. We want to also make you feel better. So that subjective aspect of how are you feeling? Okay, we may have done this elimination diet, or that, we've had a more restrictive therapeutic diet. So as they are feeling better and, they're feeling a bit more clear, less brain fog, more energy. And I'm like, okay, so let's start adding back in some foods. Let's test. Let's play scientist with yourself and go, okay, let's see how this works. Because as AJ so beautifully said, yeah, there are times that you have to totally eliminate, but it doesn't mean you don't have to, stop eating it forever. Same with you, Dr. Stephanie, as you said, that you had to stop a lot of things, but now you're able to eat some more. So, let's start testing some of these things, a little bit at a time, maybe one thing at a time or one family at a time, because you want to be able to know what any particular thing might be the culprit that's causing the problem. So, okay, no, still having a problem. Let's put that aside. Oh, we add this. Yeah. Yay. We can add this back in. This is doing fine. And so again, it's having those wins and then expanding, because we are dynamic creatures. Everything is changing and we're constantly in a healing state. So don't expect that you have to eat a super restrictive diet for the rest of your life. That may not be the case. Just like AJ was saying, she couldn't eat avocados for a while, but every once in a while she will. So it
makes total sense. Now, there's some cases where you do have to be restricted or restricted on. So I can't do gluten at all. And I allowed a little bit of gluten to slip back in, a little cross sensitivity. And I didn't have any gut issues because I really have an iron gut. but I started having a chronic cough. And so what does a traditional practitioner start going? They're like, well, let's give you asthma medicine. Let's give you antihistamines. Let's give you, none of those work. Well, so I had GI work done, and esophagitis, gastritis, duodenitis, colitis, all went down because I'd had just enough that there was chronic erosion. Now, what about people who don't carry the celiac gene? On the DNA 360 test, we have gluten sensitivity, we have lactose sensitivity. It doesn't mean you're a celiac. But we're finding more and more with all the pesticides. This goes back to the organic versus non-organic. Foods that have been sprayed, grains that have been sprayed, have a lot of the glyphosate. Glyphosate, herbicide, pesticide. Pesticide means death. Herb, plant, means death. All this microbiome, if you're consuming an herbicide or a pesticide, you're going to kill off that healthy microbiome that is taking care of your health. Remember, 80% of your immune system is now, we're finding, is coming from the health of your gut. So washing those foods, if you can't buy organic, wash them, peel them, do what you can to get ready. I saw somebody earlier put the environmental work group. Love environmental work group. They've got the clean 15 and the dirty dozen, learn what those are. Maximize and prioritize. When you start getting that gut back in order, then notice, I'm less anxious. Maybe it's not a stomach ache. Maybe you have more stability in your moods. Maybe you sleep better. We talked about those baseline kind of things that you need, and all of a sudden the brain's better. Blood sugar is a big thing. If you're eating foods, live food, live body, guys. Dead food, dead body. Okay. So if you're eating a bunch of packaged foods, if you're eating things that are highly processed, think about cereal. You add milk or liquid to it, and within 5 or 10 minutes, it's this soupy, mushy. That's all starch. That starch is all sugar. That sugar is going to spike your blood sugar. Insulin is a storage hormone. Then you crash. Okay. And then the brain's doing this. So the gut's trying to absorb it, and you're feeding the bad bacteria. I like to look at the gut like a housing development. And you've got transitional neighborhoods that are a little dicey. You've got maybe downtown that's really dicey. You've got out the suburbs that are so beautiful. But you know what? All of a sudden, those transitional neighborhoods, people start moving in, businesses start moving in, they start, rejuvenating them, and all of a sudden they're the cool place to be. If you've got one of those dicey guts, you can start getting those healthy things back in, and getting, your nose in the microbiome, and hug a tree. And do you guys recommend doing a variety of probiotics? Do you change brands? Do you vary? Let's say you don't have a gut 360 right now and you want to do, how do you like to choose your probiotics?
So I normally go with, so there's certain bacteria that is higher histamine, and there's some that is lower histamine, right? So I typically opt for something that I know is on the lower histamine side of the spectrum if I suspect a histamine intolerance with a client. Now, if I don't, then, that is where having, the gut test done is better, because then we can kind of dial in, okay, you should focus here, right? And I'm always thinking cost, right? What's efficient? If I can just have the data to know what I should be spending my money on, let's go that route, right?
Oh, you are a boomer. You are such a boomer.
But right. So ideally you have data, and then your decisions are driven by that data. You're saving yourself time and money and effort and all the things, right? Because they're all limited. If you don't, you play a little bit of that guessing game. You, again, like Dr. Varden said, and I love it, you're kind of your own little scientist. And there is that piece of that in all of this and in our health, because there's never going to be just like a single magic bullet, whether it be a probiotic or some kind of supplement or a test, right? Sometimes we have to do a bunch of different testing. We need as big of a picture as we can. And then we still, because as a practitioner, I'm not you, right? So as much as I can guide and I can give these little nuggets and we can like go on this little investigation together, you're still the one that says, oh, you know what? I have an inner peace, right? I've come to this calm. Like you said, my anxiety has gone down. I can't identify that for you. You can communicate it to me and we can celebrate those wins, but you have to do that. And so even when it comes to a probiotic, like I took this one and my gut seemed a little bit upset, or I felt burpy, or, whatever it was, you kind of experiment a little, but I still think if you can, a data-driven decision there is a really great way to go.
Dr. Varden, what about you on probiotics, your favorites?
Well, I will say that lately, like for the last year, I've really been into making sure that I have Akkermansia muciniphila. That plays a huge part in so many things, and something that we've talked about in a couple of webinars with the GLP-1, because it actually helps to upregulate that. It actually helps with creating mucin, which is like a glue to help rehab the gut. It's actually a particular keystone species that I happen to use in a leaky gut protocol that I use. But of course, that's just one of the keystone species. You have your Bifidium bacterias, you have your lactobacillus, you have, your Saccharomyces, a lot of these keystone species. It's like, you don't want to just necessarily throw the kitchen sink at it, but if you haven't done the test and if you're not willing to do the test, taking a broad spectrum, making sure that you've got those keystone species in there can be good. I do like changing it up some. Personally, I've used like Pendulum's, their Daily Metabolic Pro. I'm currently taking their GLP-1, which has more than just Akkermansia muciniphila. I eat, the foods, the yogurts, the kimchi, the fermented foods. I happen to be one where I can handle that. And so I like to go to foods first, or let's feed the good guys. So your soluble and insoluble fibers, you can seed your gut, but you got to feed them. If you don't feed them, they're going to die out again. So making sure that you're having the things. If you can have dark chocolate, which I love, thank God I can have, then that's really good. That is food. Also green bananas, or I usually get organic green bananas. Once they start to turn, then I'll have that. That is fantastic. That is, food for your gut bacteria. Eating a lot of vegetables, again, soluble and insoluble fibers. That is super important. So changing it up, but I still go back to what AJ said and diving into my scientific self. I want the data. Let's be more precise about it. Speaking of precise, precision is what it's all about. Precision medicine. It's like, let's not just throw spaghetti at a wall and see what sticks and go for, whatever the big flashy thing is. We here at the DNA company are actually starting a precision program that is very specific to you as the individual. And I would absolutely love it if our captain-in-chief, Tracy Wood, our CEO, would actually say a few words on that.
Is Tracy still with us? Tracy, come on.
No, I went home for the day, ladies. Come on now.
Dr. Varden is letting the cat out of the bag that we have a new offering that the company is going to do, which is super, super exciting.
So yeah, we do. We did start with a lot of collaboration between our clinical staff, our chief medical officer, chief science officer. We did start a program for Precision 360. And essentially it is designed only for specific patients. So we're actually interviewing people for that process. And we're going to cap it out at a certain number of new patients every year. And there's a lot of reasons for that, right? Dr. Varden, you were just speaking to it. Precision medicine is really that. It's not, 7 minutes in front of your practitioner and you're out the door and you're treated and treated and you feel the same way you felt, 30, 60, 90 days ago. This is designed to take somebody and test all facets of their life. So if somebody has a genetic history or a history of cancer, we're going to make part of their program a focus on liquid biopsy. If somebody has a multiple medical diagnosis and requires multiple medications, we're going to make part of their program PGX so we can see the efficacy of what it is they're being prescribed. So we really take the patient through, we take them through an intake initially, and anyone that's interested in being considered for the intake, all they have to do is send an email to ceo@thednacompany.com, and I will answer that email personally and share with you kind of the parameters of the program. But it's designed to take them through multiple tests. So we do a couple of blood tests. There will be a venipuncture. Of course, there's the gut 360. There's the DNAging, right? And we do two entry points on DNAging. Day 0, right, when you start the program, to see how you're aging, see how your tissue's aging, at what rate you're aging, and if there's any areas of concern. And then we do a checkup about 9 months into your program and take that barometer, right? See if there's movement and progress, and see how many years you can be giving yourself back just by making some changes in your life. But this is an intense program. This is not for someone that dabbles. This is not for someone that wants to try something. This is for somebody that maybe is at the point where they've tried everything and they feel like they have so much information coming at them. They don't know what's real. They don't know what's scientifically validated, and they're just at a loss. We match them based on their symptomology and their HPI, or history of present illness, to a practitioner, and then we design an entire team around them, and that team stays with them day in and day out. And the program lasts. It can last up to a year depending on the patient need. But there's a lot of testing. There's a lot involved in it. And again, it's not for everybody. We are going to cap it out at a certain number of people. So if anybody wants to look into it, if they feel like it's something that they're really willing to invest in themselves and really take themselves to that level that they know they can be, we'd be happy to hear from you. So CEO@dnacompany.com.
You just said, Tracy. I mean,
Yes, ma'am.
The really great thing is there's some people saying, hey, I'm interested. Hey, I'm game. Hey, I want to get some ideas about cost. They're all personalized. That's why it's precision.
Absolutely.
It's personalized for you. But here's the thing to tell you. Most people, I don't know if people know, 67% of people are on high deductible healthcare plans. They're paying $3,000, $6,000, $12,000 a year before they're all covered.
Right.
And when you look at doing a program with the company and really personalizing it for you, rather than going and spending all that deductible on a regular medical program that is, let's just spend 7 minutes and push you through a line.
Right.
This is a lifelong thing because it's unique to you. And some of the things that people have said to me is, well, maybe I don't have the money now. And I said, well, let's talk about Alzheimer's. Let's talk about heart disease. Let's talk about diabetes. What does that cost you over your life? So,
well, we've made it really accessible, Doc. Okay. So a couple of things we've done. One, we can take HSA and FSA, right? So your flex spending dollars, and that's both in Canada and the United States. Another thing we have done is this is tax deductible. This is a medical program. So any of you that know anything about your taxes, your AGI, or your adjusted gross income, if you spend 7.5% of that number on a combined, whether it's MD, RX, glasses, dental, wellness, health programs, anything that qualifies, and we qualify, that becomes a tax deduction. So you can recover some of that. But I hear this every day. Okay. I sit on the panel with, as you know, each of you, depending on the patient, we have one of you doctors in, and then Allison, who is also functionally trained and part of the team. We all sit in and we go through and do the intake, and we do the interview. And we get a lot of information, what you've tried in the past, where you feel like it either supported you or didn't support you. And again, if you're a fit, the three of us go back and we go through your medical case that you share with us, and you do have to share that information. We go through all of that and we literally say, well, this is perfect for Dr. Varden. They need to have, 4 of these different types of tests and 2 of these venipunctures, and then it totals this amount of money. No 2 programs thus far have been the same, because everybody needs something different, right? So it's a very involved program. We're getting phenomenal response and results, but we're not taking just anybody. We have to look at this and say, we believe that we're a good fit for what you have going on. And we believe that our practitioners and our testing and our supplementation and our ideology is going to help you. And we think that we're going to make measurable results for you, or we're not going to waste your time, and we're certainly not going to waste ours, right? But there's a lot of ways to make it affordable. We also have, I think it's called Affirm. This is an Allison question. It's a program called Affirm, and a lot of people use it, on Apple to buy iDevices and whatnot. And it allows you to, have, 0% interest and things like that. So there's a lot to it, but every single patient will be different.
Well,
no matter
Tracy,
what.
you just brought up a key point, and then we're going to get to questions, because we've had such good feedback. I mean, I really love how many people have stayed on this whole time and are so engaged. The DNA company has 73 actionable genes that we're working with right now. 73. Now, there's a lot of companies out there that do DNA, and they'll tell you you can roll your tongue. Yes, I can. I didn't need a DNA test to show you that.
I can do
Yeah,
that.
there you go. All right, see, Tracy. But is that okay, Dr. Varden? All right, let's see. Okay, AJ. Are you
AJ?
Are you the? Oh, we all
I can do it too.
We all can do it.
Well, we didn't need a DNA test to do that, but we have 73 actionable genes.
Yeah.
Can I tell them that in the next couple months we're going to add 10 more?
Well, you just did.
Okay. Well, if you already have our test, you also get an update. And so you don't have to go back to buy a new test. And
That's all correct.
we continue to do research. We continue to. If there's a cholesterol issue in the family or cardiovascular inflammation, here's the actionable items. Here's the starting point, as Dr. Varden said. Here's the data before. Here's the action. Here's the data afterwards. Love that it's actionable and results driven. And there's documentation. I heard AJ talk about maybe you're feeling better and it made a difference. Maybe you're not feeling better, but you've got the results that show you're in the right direction. Then we can coach you and say, hang on. You may not feel it yet, but hang on, because the data is there and we can see it. So that's the beauty of this. The other thing that I think is really critical is that we keep your privacy. I mean, guys, let's talk about it. Big data is huge. Facebook's watching you, the TV's watching you, your cell phones are tracking you. If your DNA, I mean, there's a whole bunch of HIPAA, this health protection, but there's a lot of groups that have these little loopholes, and they share your data. They spread your data. They're selling it to your insurance company to change the rates. Tracy, will you just do this, and then we're going to get to the final question?
Yes, because I have to get back to work, doctor.
All right, I'm sorry, but can you tell us how important it is that we keep data private? Because it's just so important we keep it private.
So, I mean, it's obvious, right? You guys have seen 23andMe. They've been breached like I think it's a half a dozen times. Blue Cross got breached. AT&T got breached. I mean, your information is out there somewhere. Make no mistake. We take a great deal of pain in order to ensure that we've got the tertiary redundancies built. We've got the vault. I mean, the majority of everything we do goes inside a GitHub vault process. So there's a lot of security around that, which is important. But you know, if you look at your insurance company, I mean, for example, when we run a PGX test, Blue Cross is asking us for your DNA, and we have said no. And so some of you have asked us to run your PGX test, and in most cases, PGX is covered at a good percentage. Well, if they ask for your DNA, we say no. You obviously don't want us giving your DNA to Blue Cross, because Blue Cross has zero reason to have your DNA for anything other than selling you to a biobank, which we won't participate. So when someone comes in and says, hey, Tracy, can you run my PGX? And I know it's covered by my insurance, I'll come back and say, well, Blue Cross wants your DNA, or you get to pay, you know, $549 of the PGX test. And they're paying that cash every time. So while they do ask me for it, Dr. Nielsen, as you know, my response is a very eloquent thanks, but no thanks.
Privacy matters. All
Yes,
right.
yes, ma'am.
We've
All right,
got
ladies, thank you
15
very much.
minutes left.
Doctors, thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you so
everybody.
much for coming, Trace. We appreciate you so much. Let's answer some questions. So, Sherry said, is there a main reason that causes bloating? Typically, it's present now, but it's usually low motility. There's also a lot of stress in my life, and I'm dealing with early cognitive decline in my family. AJ, bloating in somebody's gut.
We are all so unique, and the bacteria in our guts, our microbiome is so different, right? And that's why one person can eat a food and they feel amazing. Another person can eat the exact same food and be bloated and look like they're pregnant, right? So there isn't one solution, right? And so it's going to be very personal. And I say, if you are really feeling as if you just have no idea of what is causing the bloating, start a food journal, right? So when you eat something, right? Because, and also based on your transit time and how long it takes you to digest foods, you might experience symptoms from a food 3 days after you've consumed it. Right. So people can have very long transit times, which means, you know, transit is how long from going in here to coming out the other end. Right. And so keeping a journal where you can say, you know what did I have a few days ago? Because a lot of times we want to associate our bloating and the way that we're feeling in our stomach, or overall, we want to associate it with what we just ate. Right. And then we can't find a pattern. But if you'll keep a food journal, and then you can look a few days back, oh, this happened, or to the day before, oh, I ate that. Okay. And keep kind of a food journal alongside a symptom journal with some dates to help you be you're your best advocate. And those are just simple, low cost things that you can do at home to start trying to find a pattern and unearth some information.
Love it. Love it. Okay, and the next one I'm going to take, can you explain for others about antibodies created to gluten and what causes that? So when we test for celiacs, a lot of times they will do the gliadin test. I will tell you, studies show up to 50% of the gliadin tests are wrong. Here's why. Antibodies are produced, and what will happen is if you eat a food, i.e. gluten, and then you start making the response, the inflammatory response, you will then see them on the antibody antigen test. However, if your gut is so far gone, you can't mount a response, then you'll see the antibodies are low and they say you don't have celiac. So I have half of my family that's been tested and half that hasn't. I can tell you every one of them had celiacs. Half tested positive that got it, half tested negative, even though they had the test. Here's the thing. If you're having chronic gut issues, if you can't think, if you have autoimmune disease, any autoimmune disease, you need to think about maybe not celiacs, but gluten sensitivity, because the leaky gut and holes in your gut are allowing things to get into your bloodstream, and the things that get into your bloodstream then are causing these other reactions. So whether you have celiac or not, whether you have gluten sensitivity or not, pulling out foods that are sprayed with the glyphosate or that can trigger a response of inflammation, any inflammation for either short-term or long-term, are going to help you get down to there. Now, we talked about our microbiome. Dr. Varden, I want to go to you. There was a question, and I know you addressed it before, but I want you to do this again. What things do you want people to look at on their Gut 360 for vitamin D and to see if they have a compromised microbiome?
That would be the vitamin D pathway, your glutathione conjugation pathway. So those are the GST genes. You will find those in the anti-inflammatory system of the 7 system reports that we do. It's under anti-inflammatory. We also talk about it actually in quite a few things, because your glutathione conjugation pathway, which is a detoxification pathway, also works into your cardiovascular system and also deals with other systems of the body. So
Awesome.
And the other one is the FUT2 gene. So that you will find with your methylation pathway, and it's kind of scattered, throughout, because again, very important with the vitamin B. B as in boy.
Okay. So next question is, I purchased a DNA 360 and showed my vitamin D was suboptimal. I need to take vitamin D sublingually morning and night. If that's a good thing. If your vitamin D is low, you can take it more than once a day, and breaking it up can actually help. My vitamin D test shows an 80. Do I need to take vitamin D with K2? And what does K2 do?
Okay, so when you're doing your vitamin D3, great levels, by the way, I would wonder how much you are still taking. Like, what is your maintenance dose? Because you may need to, or you could possibly back off some. If you are taking your D3, you really should be taking K2 with it. Why? Because D3 will take calcium in the system no matter where it is, even from the bones. And obviously we want the calcium to be in the bones, in our teeth, so K2 helps to do that. So if there is any calcium floating around, the K2 will be there to pull it into the bones. So that's really the bottom line of why you want to have the K2 with your D3.
Perfect. We're going to do 2 more questions. So for AJ, I thought you should buy organic if you're planning on eating the skins of a fruit or vegetable. Otherwise, you can just wash them like an orange that you're not eating, or you don't eat them by regular. Is that true? Not true? Talk about toxicity.
Now, if we're going to talk about pesticides, herbicides, those kinds of things that are sprayed on a plant, that's one discussion, or waxes, things that are put on there afterwards. But a lot of foods that are not organic, especially in that fruit vegetable realm, they could be genetically modified. Okay, so you can't scrape the skin off of genetics, right? It is the plant itself has been altered. It is different, right? It is a genetically modified organism. So there has been some scientists in there scientisting, making his little genetically modified things there, and then it's grown into a plant that you eat. And so you can't wash that off, right? Now, again, this comes back to budget and what you're doing and which foods you're getting, right? can you take the skin off of something? Was it more of a superficial kind of a thing where you bought it at a farmer's market? They aren't going to go and get some organic certification because that is a lot of money, but they say, I'm using organic seeds, I'm growing it organically, but if there are some bugs, I will spray a little bit of something on there, and then you go home and you can kind of wash that off, right? We're all at different positions when it comes to what we can do financially and what we have time for, and what we can focus on. And so really, you can't necessarily scrape everything off, scrub everything off, but you can set yourself up for success and minimize exposure, right? And so that's where you'll hear of people, soaking their fruits or vegetables or doing different things like that. So yes, that is not fully true, not fully false. That's kind of where I would place that question.
So quick question for both of you. This is not the one I was going to refer to, but seeded or unseeded fruits, AJ?
I mean, it's, if they have seeds, I think that's how they're supposed to be, right?
Dr. Varden?
Yes, I like seeds in my fruit.
Seeds, guys, they're sterile if they're seedless. That's genetically modified. They're sterile. You don't want to eat things that sterilize. Excuse me.
Because then we can get
Question.
into.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, then we can get into a whole nother webinar about fertility and all the issues we're seeing.
We have one coming up on that.
Okay.
Actually, okay, so, and for Dr. Varden, skin cancer and the microbiome.
Actually, yes, there is a study in Frontiers. I can get that in a second, and I'll put the link up. But they did find that in some Mendelian randomized studies did find that the gut microbiome was causally associated with basal cell carcinoma, melanomal skin cancer, and ease of skin tanning. So actually what I'll do is I'll put the link for that paper. So yep, that's the conclusion, that there is an association for that.
So remember, your gut, it was the inside of the donut, your skin is the outside. If the gut is disrupted, the outside's going to be disrupted. It all works together in this. And speaking of working together, this has been such a pleasure for us all to work together. Yes, there's a replay. I am so impressed that we started with so many people and they stayed 99% of the way through. Let's replay this. You will get the replay. Join us on future webinars. We appreciate you. We continue to come out with new and innovative things because we have such strong leadership at the top. So many of you are asking about tests. So many of you are asking about interviews. So many of you are asking about, you've got your test a long time ago and you're ready to engage. So magic powers it be, if you'll put in those emails one more time, that people can reach out so that they can be part of precision medicine or talk to a functional genomic practitioner. You are so welcome. We are blessed that you're here. We feel so happy to have such engaged audience with such great questions, and know that there is much, much more to come. Take care. God bless. Be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Doctors, excellent job. AJ, thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.